What's up, internet? In today's video, I will be expanding upon the two concepts that I brought up in the last video on why meditate, the two compelling reasons for anyone to consider meditation. So if you haven't watched that video, I do urge you to have a look at it before you jump into this one. And if you have, welcome back. Let's dive right into it. If we haven't met, my name is Trey, and this channel is all about self-improvement, and not just any kind of self-improvement. It's about very serious self-improvement. Just how serious, you might ask? Well, it is 100% serious 40% of the time. Today's video might lean a little bit closer to the 40% of the time, but in any case, it is a fascinating topic, and I hope you learn something from it. So let's begin by unpacking the idea of simulation of one, which I brought up in the previous video. And the gist of the idea being, even though we feel like we are experiencing reality, what we are really doing is we are projecting our unique version of reality onto reality itself. And the crazy thing is everyone is sort of doing the same thing. To sort of better illustrate this, I'm going to share with you an analogy that has greatly helped me to put this whole thing in perspective. So it becomes a little bit less abstract, right? Because let's face it, a lot of these ideas are not that easily graspable. So I want you to imagine that you are in a movie theater enjoying a great movie. I'm sure you've enjoyed your fair share of great movies. And like any great movie, you kind of find yourself getting a bit lost in the experience, right? And you might lose track of time, you might lose your sense of space. So for example, you might be in the theater with 100 or 200 other people, but during the duration of the movie, they are not something that is within your consciousness. You're not constantly aware of their presence, right? Other than the idiot who keeps standing up to go to the toilet. But my point being, an interesting movie sort of captures you, right? It's a gripping experience where you are following through the narrative, you're following through what's happening on the screen, and you are sort of invested in the characters, you are following through their journey, experiencing what they're experiencing, and you're doing all this is happening through to you basically only via two of your five senses, which is what you see and what you hear, right? Now imagine that, what if I told you the next time you watch a movie, all your five senses are activated. So not only can you see and hear, you can also smell what the character is smelling in the movie. You can also taste, and you can also feel what they are touching, right? On top of that, what if I tell you, you can even fully and truly experience what they are thinking, their thoughts, as well as their emotions, what they're feeling. And I don't mean in sort of this sense where you just see someone on screen going through a breakup or going through like a traumatic event and you feel sad for them. I mean, what if you were completely in that position, feeling the entire range of emotions that the character is feeling at the same time? So think about it. That would be a pretty compelling experience, to say the least, right? You'll be completely absorbed into the whole thing, and it's likely that it's very difficult to pull away from it. I mean, there's no chance, basically.
Scorpion, win. Flawless victory, fatality.
If with two senses you can be captivated with all your five and plus these thoughts and emotions, there's no chance. So I say this is because I want you to think of your consciousness as the person who's actually sitting in the theater watching the screen. And what tends to happen to us is that we tend to get overly invested in what's happening on the screen, whatever drama that's happening moment to moment on that screen, whatever emotions that arises together with what's happening. And we tend to identify with what's on the screen, that we forget that, hey, actually there is a part of you, there's a part of your consciousness who is actually just sitting through all that thing, observing everything. So in essence, meditation is a way of helping you to remember that a part of you is actually the person who went to the theater, and it's not entirely what's just happening on the screen. So this brings us to point number two, and the idea being, a lot of people tend to believe that they are their thoughts and therefore they try to control them, and inevitably this will lead to disastrous results, right? So if you try the simple little exercise I gave you in the previous video, where I ask you to sit down in silence for 3 minutes and give your mind the simple instructions to not think of anything, you'll realize that this is really, really, really difficult, if not impossible to sustain. And why? Because somewhere through along the way, you realize that there's this little voice in your head that comes up and makes all kinds of remarks about what you're trying to do. You ask it not to think, and there is, what am I doing here? This is all really boring. I don't understand this. I have better things to do. Blah, 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 blah. It just keeps going on. And that voice is what I would like to call our inner roommate, and we all have one. And if at this point you're wondering, what roommate? That's the roommate. That little voice who just made that commentary, that's your roommate. And I use the analogy of a roommate is because I'm sure you live with other people, and if you did, you realize that this is not an easy thing to do, right? You probably have gotten into fights about the kitchen, classic. All kinds of things about just living behavior. We have our own habits, our own routines, our own idiosyncrasies basically, and so do other people, which makes living together a very, very difficult task. I want you to imagine that this voice in your head is actually a real person. I want you to externalize this voice in your head to be a real person, and I want you to spend a day with this person and tell me how you feel at the end of it. So pretend it's Friday night and you decided both to watch a movie, and there your roommate is there. You both decided to watch a movie and unwind after a long week. So you pick the movie, you sit down, you hit play. Not 3 minutes in, your roommate is saying, "Hey, I'm not sure the door was closed. Can you go check?" And then you go, "I'm pretty sure I closed it on the way in. It's fine." But your roommate insisted, said, "Nah, I don't feel comfortable. What if someone comes in?" And you're like, "Okay, fine." So you got up, you paused the movie, and then you went to check the door. Lo and behold, it was closed. And then you came back, and then you continued the movie. 5 minutes later, your roommate is saying, "Hey, I'm feeling hungry. Can we order something?" And you're like, maybe in like another half an hour, 1 hour, I just want to get into the movie. And your roommate goes like, "Nah, in an hour, it will be rush hour. So it will take a long time. So it's better that we order now." And unwillingly, you pause the movie again and you order some food. Now at which point you're thinking, finally, I can sit down and just enjoy the movie. Not 10 minutes later, some random girl appears on the screen and your roommate decides that this looks like one of his exes. And he suddenly got very emotional about it and started telling you about how bad a breakup it was and how much he misses her. And this just keeps going on and on and on. You just want to watch a simple movie. So I tell you this analogy is because the voice in your head is really like this roommate, right? And when you put it like this, it's really scary. But this is what's happening within our head. And what's crazier is that if such a person exists, would you hang out with that person and be friends? Probably not, right? Would you go to him or her and ask for advice? Even less likely. But this is what we do, right? When something happens, this voice goes on in our head, just giving us all kinds of senseless commentary as well as advice, and we seem to take it without actually ever questioning its credentials. I mean, knowing that it's very erratic and it is very temperamental and it kind of starts and stops and is just goes on random train of thoughts, yet we still kind of take its word for its word without really ever questioning it. And what's interesting here is that when you ask a lot of people who they are, they will instinctively tend to think that that voice in their head is them, right? And if you want to go back to the example in the story earlier about the theater experience, you realize that, hey, actually, that's not the case. There's also a part of you who's just sitting there and observing those two things. So in conclusion, maybe you're inclined to think by now that I am trying to convince you, or I'm someone who believes that the mind is a dangerous place. This is really not the case. I think Sadhguru says it best when he says that the mind is like a knife in which most people hold by the blade. The mind is like a knife in which most people hold by the blade. So just like a knife, the mind is a very precise instrument and very exacting. It's very powerful if you know how to use it properly. In conclusion, I would like to leave you with two key learnings. The first being, it is crucial that you cultivate an ability to observe experiences as objectively as possible. So the last thing you want is to always get lost in the story of the moment, whatever melodrama that's happening on screen. As much as possible, you want to retreat to being the person watching the movie, and meditation is a way of getting in touch with that part of you. And the second being that there is an inner roommate which you share your headspace with and who will always be there. And that part of you somehow will always never be contented. Is always having a commentary on every single little thing. So the key word that binds these two learnings is really distance, right? So there is a part of you which is separate from those two things. So you are not your thoughts. So you don't have to believe everything that is telling you, and also that you are not all the experiences that's in front of you, because they come and they go. There is a part of you who is just simply observing all these two things. If you made it this far, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time and energy. I know this was a very dense video with a lot of information on, some might say, a very complex and abstract topic. So hopefully I didn't butcher it too badly and that you took something away from it. Personally, I'm very passionate about this, especially these two things, because when I learned about them, they really shifted the way I view my meditation practice. They shifted the way I view myself as well as my day-to-day experiences. And by no means I live them or I'm above them by now. That's 100% not the case. I mean, I try to remember them most of the time. But in times of frustration or in times of my meditation, whenever I forget stuff, when I forget why I'm doing something or when I'm feeling frustrated, I often call upon these two topics to help me understand why I'm doing something and to separate myself from this voice in my head as well as whatever that's going on in the moment, not to get too involved in them. So if you like this video, hit the like button and leave me a comment, ask me any questions. I would love to hear from you. If not, I will see you out there on the internet.